Alright, we're back. We're talking some FF7. We're talking some Rebirth, and there's quite a bit out there to talk about over the last several days at this point. I think more specifically today, we got an interview with Hamaguchi with VG247, and then also I think he did an interview with just SquareEnix.com or something. I do want to look at those. We might not look at them today. It just depends on how long this video is. But I do actually want to hop back a few days because Shinra Arch put out a couple interesting tweets where they looked at cut content or dialogue, whatever you want to call it, from FF7 Rebirth that is a little bit interesting. Obviously, when it comes to cut content, cut dialogue, anything that's in the files that's not in the full game, it's technically not canon, but it is maybe literally not canon, I guess would be the right way to say that, but it is still interesting to talk about. For example, based on this dialogue, Cid and Vincent were actually supposed to join in on the fight against Sephiroth Reborn at the end of Rebirth. Now, obviously, we wouldn't have been able to control them. Might have been like a Red 13 situation from Remake. But it still would have been interesting to have Cid and Vincent getting in on that fight, right? Even though they're not, official party members yet, them being in the background, just doing attacks and stuff would have been pretty cool. By far the most interesting thing I've seen from this unused text that Shinra Arch put out a few days ago is at the end of the game, whenever Cloud is talking about the rift in the sky and tells everybody not to look up. For whatever reason, Cid can see the rift. And I don't know if he's meant to be initially the only one that could do it, but at least according to this text, he could see it, which is a little bit interesting because obviously Barret couldn't see it at the end of the game.
Don't look up.
Well, now I gotta look.
Again, this is unused content from FF7 Rebirth, but why would Cid be the only other person besides, I guess, Cloud that could see the rift in the sky? I don't really know why that would have been. So let's just hop into these. The Japanese text in the PC files for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth also shows that Glenn would have originally turned into President Shinra instead of Sephiroth. So right here with the Japanese text and dialogue, it's a little bit confusing because on a different image they do like this, they mentioned that red is the previous used dialogue and I guess blue is the new dialogue, but I don't think that's the case here because where President Shinra is in this dialogue is in the red. So if you look at the far left column, the end of the text, it says RUF, RGS, which is for Rufus and Glenn. I'm not really sure why RGS is for Glenn. Anyways, you can see at the end of the text that I circled, it says PRE for President. Also, the second column in this is the name of the character saying it, and it's the only text that's different. Anyways, the Glenn President Shinra dialogue says, "How long until we locate the Promised Land? And we mustn't hesitate to do all that we can." It's a little bit interesting, I guess. It doesn't really matter. I don't think it changes things too much. It makes a bit of sense that Glenn Sephiroth would want to taunt Rufus with his father because there's obviously a lot of resentment with Rufus to President Shinra. And he's also following his father's footsteps, all that other shit. And even in the full game for Rebirth, he does taunt Rufus with his father, with the a father's dream accomplished by his son. So if this scene was just a little bit different and there's President Shinra on the right instead of Sephiroth, it might have made something a little more interesting. I don't really know. I don't think it changes things that much, though. And we move on. The PC files for FF7 Rebirth, much like with Remake, have lines in the Japanese text not in the final version of the game. For example, here's some part from the party when Cloud pushes through the whispers and raises his sword above Aerith. So here we have the text from the segment of the game where Aerith is praying, and obviously Cloud raises his sword above her. And I believe, again, the blue highlighted text is the shit that's unused from Rebirth, but we have Red 13 saying, "Don't let them win," K-Seth saying, "Fight, Cloud," Yuffie saying, "Come on, get up," Tifa yelling, "Cloud," Barret saying, "What the hell are you doing?" And kind of interestingly enough, it seems like Aerith has some unused text where she just says, "Thank you," which I think is in response to the planet. She's talking to the planet because she's praying here. This I thought was pretty interesting because this is quite different from what happens in Rebirth, because this implies that our group is present, wherein Cloud's raising his sword above Aerith and attempting to deflect the blow from Sephiroth, right? But that's not how it goes in Rebirth, because our group is locked out of the water altar with the Whisper Wall, and they come to the scene late, and they roll up on the water altar when Cloud's already holding Aerith in his arms. She's already been stabbed and stuff.
Aerith.
It seems like at one point maybe the Aerith death scene, the whole ending segment of the game, was quite different, and I guess in some ways a little more faithful to the original FF7, because even though you go to the water altar with just the Cloud character model in the original FF7, I think it's meant to be implied that the whole party's together, because as soon as the piece of Genova drops and you go into a boss fight, you're not just Cloud by yourself. You have the party with you, right? And even though the Aerith death segment is just Cloud and Aerith, and then obviously Sephiroth coming down from the sky in the original FF7, I think it's meant to imply that the party's still there, maybe just kind of off screen or something. I guess at one point with Rebirth, the whole party's meant to be there and witnessing Cloud attempting to kill Aerith. And to kind of further add into when this dialogue takes place and kind of showed that the group was present during Cloud raising his sword above Aerith, you can see in the bottom right where Sephiroth talks and he says, "Don't weep, your tears are empty just like you." And in Rebirth, that dialogue happens before our group even runs up to the altar.
Don't weep. Your tears are empty. Just like you.
It seems seems like quite a drastic change too, considering that at least with this unused text, like the party's supposed to be there during that moment, versus the final product of Rebirth where they're like off in the Forgotten City or whatever behind a whisper wall and can't get in or whatever. I don't know, kind of strange. A mention from Barret about alternate worlds. The lines highlighted in red are from what was previously written. So with the blue text, Barret says, "Oh yeah, wasn't that asshole saying something about alternate worlds?" So that's another bit of dialogue that I thought was really interesting, just because our group doesn't really talk about like the different worlds that much, if at all, really. Like, obviously Cloud and Sephiroth have the one-on-one conversation where he explains the different world stuff to him. And then right after that with the Sleeping Forest walk where they're going to the Forgotten Capital, Cloud does mention the different world stuff. And then right after Aerith dies, we do have Sephiroth mention the confluence of worlds. But besides that, like, our group never is like, hey, what's up with the different world stuff? So it's kind of interesting that Barret, I guess, at one point had some dialogue regarding that.
Either way, something happened to you, didn't it?
Yeah. Got sent to another world. Apparently, there's at least a few more than one.
Is that right?
I'd explain, but I don't think I can.
And so it begins. A confluence of worlds and emotions.
Cid and Vincent were going to come in to help during the Sephiroth Reborn fight. So we have some dialogue here during one of the 14 different fights you do with Sephiroth Reborn at the end of the game. But you have Cid saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa," and then Yuffie says, "Cid Vincent," and then Vincent says, "Here he comes." I don't know if this is meant to be like them joining in on the fight, kind of like Red 13 at the end of FF7 Remake, or if this would have been just like during one of the phases, like the cutscene cinematics that happens. Maybe they're there in that moment or something. I don't entirely know. But either way, would have been nice. We know that they're main party members. We know that they can't be playable characters in this game. It would have been great to see them kind of like participate, if that makes any sense, in like that final fight, just because we see them kind of getting more attached to the party as we go. And even as we get through the game, once we get to like the Temple of the Ancients, we have like Vincent helping us escape and shit, right? He's not fighting alongside us, but he is participating in the story and shit. And if at the end of the game we had Vincent and Cid kind of fighting alongside us in some way or another against Sephiroth Reborn, it would have been a nice little teaser to the future for the third game, essentially. Tifa has a line at the spring where she says Aerith's name. I mean, there's not really a whole lot to say with this. It's just Tifa saying Aerith's name. It does kind of further solidify that Aerith did like die in this timeline or this world or whatever, and they probably put her to rest in the water like the original FF7. I guess I don't know why they would take that line out or not use that line. Maybe like they want to keep it more ambiguous is probably why they did that. I don't know. Maybe if Tifa had said Aerith's name in that moment, it might have kind of made it more obvious that she's not alive anymore. I mean, I think for the most part, I think we all understand that she is in fact dead and that Cloud's not accepting it. But they want to be vague for some reason with the ending of Rebirth. And then we get to the last one here, which to me is kind of the most interesting, where Cid seems to see the rift at the end. So right here we have the unused text, and I think all this is relatively new, at least it's different from what's in the English version of the ending. But Cloud says, "The reunion." Cid says, "Hey, you coming or what?" Cloud says, "Yeah, one sec." Tifa says, "So where do we go from here?" Cloud says, "About that, let's head north. That's where Sephiroth is." Aerith says, "You okay?" Cloud says, "Yeah, used to by now." And then Cid says, "The hell's that? Yo, look at the sky." And then Aerith says no, and then you promise not to look up. Literally, don't look at the sky. So in a lot of ways, that's quite different from the ending of Rebirth. For one, when Cloud talks about heading north to go after Sephiroth, in Rebirth, what we have now, that line of dialogue takes place after Cloud tells the party not to look up at the sky, and Barret looks up and sees nothing, right?
You have to promise not to look up.
Don't look up.
Well, now I gotta look.
Now let's go get Sephiroth. He's hiding up north.
It seemed like the ending of the game was switched around at one point because according to this dialogue, they were going to notice the rift in the sky after talking about going after Sephiroth up north. But obviously Cid noticing the rift in the sky is quite different. Now, I don't know if that dialogue is meant to imply that the whole party was going to see the rift in the sky, but Cid was the first one to say it, first one to call it out or whatever. Or if only Cid, besides Cloud, was going to be able to see the rift in the sky. But either of those are very interesting and very different from what we got with Rebirth. To be honest with you guys, I don't recall if we got any confirmation of what the rift in the sky is meant to be. There's obviously theories out there about it being like Cloud's like fractured mind, which is why Zack's seen it and Cloud's seen it. And then maybe like Zack's journey is like inside Cloud's mind in live stream or something like that, something along those lines. And there actually is a bit of credibility to that theory, given that with the original FF7 there seems to be the same kind of like rifts in the live stream segment whenever Tifa's piecing Cloud's mind back together. But if the rifts in the sky are meant to be symbolic of Cloud's like broken mind, his fractured mind or whatever, I guess it would make sense for other characters to see it. So I don't know why Cid would have been seeing it if it's meant to be like a Cloud only thing. Also, it's like a theory, or maybe it's been confirmed at some point, that like the fractures in the sky are meant to like imply that a world is coming to an end, which is why Zack's seen it, and then also Cloud's seen it because Sephiroth is going to attempt to destroy the world. So other characters besides like Cloud and Zack, and I guess Aerith and probably Sephiroth too, being able to see those rifts in the sky is interesting. I don't know why that would have been the case, right? Like I don't know why they would have went the route with I guess this original idea, original text for the game they're like Cid or maybe the rest of the party was going to be able to see the rift in the sky, and then they decided to change that entirely with the full game. But also, is this dialogue meant to imply that like only Cid was going to see this? And if that was the case, like why only Cid? Because like he's a cool character or whatever, but there's like people in the main party that are infinitely more interesting and more important to the overall Final Fantasy VII story. That like why would Cid kind of get that rub, if that makes any sense, right? Like why is he the one? I kind of lean in favor of maybe the whole party was going to see it, but Cid's just kind of calling it out. But I really don't know because it's unused text, so who knows exactly what it was going to be. That is pretty much the video, my dude. So, of course, this is unused text, unused dialogue from FF7 Rebirth, so it's technically not canon. But it's kind of interesting to look at, like, maybe the original concepts of for the game. Like, you know, things were kind of moved around, things were different, characters were present where they aren't in Rebirth currently. So I'm very curious what you guys think of this unused text, and especially with, like, Cid or maybe the rest of the party to be able to see the rift. Like, how does that affect the story? I think that changes things quite a bit if the rest of the party can see that fucking ominous thing in the sky. Anyways, we'll have to look at the Hamaguchi interviews tomorrow, and we'll maybe do both the interviews in one video to kind of depend on how much there is to talk about, how long the video gets. We'll have to see. Anyways, that's the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Search networks in the description below. Follow me on Twitter, @YT. That's it. Bye.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine or leave it like Cobain.